Hello, everyone, and welcome to FCI Live 2025. Thank you for joining us for our very first session, Finding Feasibility for Your Co-op. I am JQ Hanna with Food Co-op Initiative, and we would like to first thank our FCI Live champion sponsors. We have three of them this year. Thank you guys so much to National Co-op Grocers, to Dot Co-op, and to Colluminate for making this series possible. We're going to dive right into the session today because if you know me, there's more content we can probably cram into this hour, but it's all valuable. So we're going to jump right into this topic of feasibility. And just for those of you who may not know me, my name is JQ Hanna. I am the Interim Executive Director of Food Co-op Initiative. My pronouns are Z, Zer. I also welcome they, them. And if you happen to make a mistake, just correct it. No big deal. My co-op background is that I was the general manager of Common Ground Food Co-op in Urbana, Illinois, which is still about 3, 4 blocks from my house, from where I'm sitting right now. And I was there for 9 years and have been the director of programming at Food Co-op Initiative for 10 years until just stepped into this new role.
Yes.
So, and again, I'm going to ask everyone who to please mute. Thank you so much. Real quick, what you can expect from this session. Feasibility is a huge conversation. This is going to be an overview of what feasibility is when developing a new cooperative. What do we mean by that? We should leave with an understanding that there are 4 areas of co-op feasibility. One of them is unique to co-ops. The other 3 are typical to all businesses, although we have a certain way we do them. But one is unique to co-ops, and you should know what all 4 are and how they fit together. And last but not least, we're going to talk about when is feasibility in the process? When should it happen? Why it's so critical to your co-op having a future, why it's something we're keeping our eyes on constantly. So that's what you should be able to walk away with at the end of this session. We're going to jump into what do we mean in the first place by feasibility when we're talking to startup food co-op organizers. Okay. In the dictionary, it means the possibility, capability, or likelihood of something being done or accomplished. Pretty straightforward. And in business, in general, it means assessing your vision for your business in detail to determine if and in what form it can be financially successful. So it's very aimed at that financial success. This is important to our co-ops too. We don't disagree with this business definition. We broaden it. A startup food co-op definition of feasibility broadly might be that organizing a cooperative that is owned by the community to meet its vision of a stronger community, however it defines that, we'll get into that in a minute, through the running of a successful business. And when I reference community, I mean the people who will own the co-op. So whether you're going to be a consumer co-op, which is what the vast majority of food co-ops are, owned by those who will shop at the co-op, or a worker co-op, or which is owned by the employees of the cooperative, or a hybrid of the two, or a producer co-op, which is actually, until recently, as far as I knew, didn't exist in food co-ops, but I found an exception. Most of us are consumer or hybrid food co-ops, but whoever the community word defines the people who will own the co-op. So we're organizing a cooperative that is owned by the community to meet their vision of what it would be to be a stronger community through the running of a successful business. That would be the definition, a broad definition by what we mean by feasibility. But we're going to get a lot more depth than that. So a co-op is a thriving co-op with an activated ownership that is fulfilling a meaningful role in its community that the community has defined together. And it means a business that meets the vision of the owners that is economically sustainable. The whole point of a cooperative business is to create an economic engine, an effective economic engine that is meeting the vision and values of those who own the cooperative. That's the whole point. So it's both. It is not just one. It is not just our vision and values, and it is not just the effective business that is economically sustainable. It is the marriage of those two things together. That's when we have a feasible cooperative. So when we say we're trying to develop a feasible startup food co-op business, what do we mean? What exactly are we, to test if something's feasible, what are we testing? What is the thing that we're testing to decide if the co-op is feasible indeed? Okay. And So first off, we're going to start with a little bit of a basis in the FCI Startup Development Framework. This is going to be new to a lot of folks. We just released this last fall. So we're going to kind of go over some of the details of where this is all going to fit, where this feasibility this work fits within the framework. So the vision piece at the top, we're going to go more in depth into that. You see there's purpose, business planning, and core values you see in that part of the graphic of the development framework. This is what we're building. Everything underneath it, the areas of work, the stages of organizing, the resources we're going to need to do all that work, this is the work we'll be doing to make that vision a reality and the stuff we need to do it. But what we're building, that's the vision up at the top. And we're going to go a little more in depth into what that is. So the vision, as we define it in the development framework, has three pieces. It has the purpose, the core values, and the business plan. We're growing a cooperative to meet the purpose through our core values. We're going a little more into this in a minute again. From that purpose and core values, we need to develop a sustainable, feasible business plan for a business that will forward that purpose and core values, that is sustainable, that is economically sustainable, and will be there to serve our community and to grow our purpose and core values. So when we say we're testing the feasibility, we're actually testing the feasibility of the entire vision at a food co-op. We are testing the purpose, the core values, and the business plan. But I will admit, and you'll see that throughout this session, we're going to be leaning heavily on testing that business plan. And we're going to go into that. But the purpose and core values are also part of it. We are testing that entire vision, the thing that we exist to create and then continue to operate and grow in our communities. So I'm going to give you just a quick example so we understand what we're talking about. This is a made-up food co-op, Bricktown Community Market, although it's based on many other co-ops, start food co-ops that we've worked with at Food Co-op Initiative. Their purpose is to build the economic wealth and physical health of Southeast Bricktown through cooperation. So the purpose tells us, what are we trying to accomplish for who? Big and broad. Big and broad. The thing that really needs addressing in our community, the way we want to grow and improve our community, is to build the economic wealth and physical health of our community. Those things are critical to us. Those are the main things that's the purpose. That's why we are putting all this work into building a cooperative and then continuing to sustain a cooperative. For who? For Southeast Bricktown in this case. This isn't a session just on vision, so we're not going to go through all the iterations, but yours could be for the entire, it could be for the entire city of, it could be for the entire valley. Like I know the Lehigh Valley for Bethlehem Co-op Market, they have a whole area or region. It can be different in size depending on your community, who you're trying to serve, and their goal to build the economic wealth and physical health, to putting those things first, may not be what's first for your community. It's different for every community. This is one example. So the purpose of Bricktown Community Market, we got that. Then their core values are the ways that they will not negotiate on delivering that purpose to the community. They will run a sustainable business because they believe that cooperative business is the way to deliver this purpose. They will offer, in their case, daily access to fresh and affordable food. Now they'll get to define later what they mean by that. But they have said our community needs to get this economic wealth and physical health, daily access to this fresh food, being a space where community comes together and creating jobs that are at or above living wage. So they want to create meaningful jobs. These are purpose and the core ways we're going to deliver that. Then comes the business plan, the third piece of the vision, which is built from the purpose and core values. But this is the good old-fashioned business plan. If you've ever built a business plan, read a business plan, this is the plan of how we're going to run a business that can be self-sustaining and healthy and continue to thrive and grow. And so that might look like, for Bricktown, in a very small nutshell, we want to have a 10,000 square foot full service grocery store in the with a community room, and it's going to have it serve 90% conventional foods, meaning what we see in most chain grocery stores, with about 10% food that is local and or labeled natural organic. But mostly it's going to look like your traditional conventional grocery store, and we want to have a full service deli. That would be a specific business that will meet the purpose and core values. You could have said a grocery store, which is where we ideally start. And then we start to narrow that down. But the business plan defines what is that business going to be that's going to meet our purpose and our core values. Okay, I'm bringing all of this up because then also it could take another form. We're going to get back to this later. Also, we could meet the purpose and core values through a 3,000 square foot store that is going to be 90% selling products that are local and or natural foods, so kind of a natural food store vibe. And they're going to have grab and go prepared meals. They're not going to have a full service deli, and they're going to have a little bit of in-store seating. Could that still meet their purpose and core values? Yeah, there's a lot of arguments that it could. We're going to get back to it, but it's important to know this business plan piece is the piece that we're going to get back to, but it can shift and move a little bit. But we are testing the feasibility of the purpose and core values and then finding a business plan that meets those, that tests as feasible, that can be successful as a business. Okay. We're going to get into the 4 main types of feasibility, but before I do that, in the comments chats, any questions or thoughts people want to share about just this core concept of feasibility and what it is we're testing when we talk about testing the feasibility of our startup food co-op? All right, then. I will keep going. So there are 4 types of feasibility that we're going to be testing. So if we're starting a food co-op, we've got to be testing all 4 of these. Let's get into what they are. The 4 types of co-op feasibility are community feasibility, market feasibility, financial feasibility, and site feasibility. When someone says, oh, we're doing a feasibility study for our co-op, for our startup food co-op, I always wonder, wait, which kind of feasibility do you mean? Is the feasibility study you're doing all 4 of these things? Is it doing 2 of these things? Is it doing 1 of these things? There are different ways you test these different kinds of feasibility. We're not going to have time to get too in depth in that today, but we'll touch on it a bit as we go. But when we say feasibility for a startup food co-op, we're looking at all 4 of these aspects, not just one. Often if someone says we're hiring someone to do a feasibility study, what they mean is a market study. Get into that means in a little bit more in a minute. The first one, community feasibility, is unique to cooperatives. The other 3 are standard in all types of business, market, financial, and site feasibility, if it's going to be a physical brick and mortar store. So what's unique to us is this first piece, community feasibility. Community feasibility is something, like I said, unique to cooperatives. You have to, if you have community feasibility, if you have a powerful purpose and values that activate your community, you're going to create robust support in the community. We don't just have them, they're really activating our community. We have touched on something that is important to our community that our community says, yes, we need and want that. We have community feasibility if we have a member ownership that is consistently growing and providing the capacity and leadership needed for the co-op to succeed. It's all big and broad still. It gets more specific in the stages. And the co-op being of the community it was built to serve. This is really critical to community feasibility. It is being built by it is of the community, not for the community. Meaning the community itself is building the co-op, the community that's going to be served, the neighborhood, the area, the part of town, the community that is meant to be served is the people who are organizing the co-op and are behind the co-op. It is not being created for them. Now, this is unique to cooperatives. You can have absolutely wonderful intentions for why you're starting a for-profit business that is independently owned or a nonprofit grocery store. Those now exist. And they can both have wonderful intentions, purpose, and yet they are being built for the community, not by the community. This is unique to cooperatives. None of the other 3 types of feasibility, site feasibility, financial feasibility, market feasibility, none of this is really going to succeed in a cooperative if the community feasibility doesn't exist. If we don't have real buy-in and momentum from our community, the people who are going to own the co-op, who are going to be served by the co-op, we don't tend to see success. We will dig into this more. This is, again, really unusual and unique to co-ops. People who are used to building businesses find this part sometimes the hardest part to understand. Community feasibility is all about, well, the purpose and
Yeah.
core values. Oh, I'm sorry. If you have a comment, please put it in the chat. That would be wonderful. I'm happy to address it. So community feasibility is all about that purpose and core values. The business plan piece of the vision, that's what we're testing when it mostly when it comes to site feasibility, financial feasibility, and market feasibility. So community feasibility is overall is really testing the feasibility of the purpose that you've set and the core values, the way you're going to deliver that purpose, and saying, does this resonate enough to activate our community to build a co-op together and to keep supporting and sustaining this co-op, even though it's not going to be easy for us to build it. And even once it's open, it isn't necessarily something that just kind of goes along and ticks on its own. It takes a community to support it. So that's what we're testing during community feasibility. Market feasibility, our second type of feasibility. Market feasibility, in a very short definition, is enough customer demand to produce the sales needed for your co-op to be financially sustainable based on your specific business plan. Okay. And so what do we mean by this? When I say specific business plan, I mean, where will that store be located? What size will it be? What types of products? You heard me referencing earlier if it's going to be mostly conventional products, mostly natural and organic and local products, a mix. We referenced that a little bit. What kind of departments? Are we planning on having a lot of prepared foods or very little prepared foods? These specific pieces together will tell you a lot about how much people will shop with you. Market feasibility tests that. And we have this tendency to believe, as organizers in our communities, people who are visionaries in our communities, we're like, well, we will build something along with these aligned to these values, and it'll have all this stuff that we know people tell us they want. Like people tell us they want a full service deli, they want to be able to order sandwiches, and therefore the sales will be there. The reality is, we still have to think like a business and test real business realities. And we may very much want a full service deli that's doing sandwiches and maybe a fresh cut meat program at the next counter and a smoothie bar. But if we are in a community of population of like, let's say 20,000 people, it's not impossible, but highly unlikely it's going to work. There is decades and decades of grocery store data, independent grocery store data, and food co-op specifically data showing us which kind of programs and products have been successful, what kind of sales they've been able to produce and make possible, so the business and how sustainable those have been for the business. Market feasibility is going to test that. It's not the only factor to feasibility, but it's an extremely critical piece. And we're not making this stuff up. This is coming from decades of data because if you're working with anyone who's consistently worked with food cooperatives, everybody is in this because they believe in it. We want our food co-ops to be successful. You want to organize a food co-op for your community that's going to be successful. The last thing you want is to put in all this work and work with your community members and get them excited around a vision and then watch it fail, right? So we all know that, but the market feasibility is about facing the business realities and what might need to shift or move or change to get the sales we need for the store to open and stay successful. Also showing up in your business plan will be, how are you going to fund it? And there's two pieces to this we'll get into, which is financial feasibility. So we've got market feasibility, community feasibility. Now we're going to talk financial feasibility. This means you have a financial plan that shows both the funding of the cost to build a business that delivers your co-op's vision is feasible. So we can find that funding in a format that will work for the costs, the real costs of what it's going to cost to build the grocery store we're envisioning. And that business, once built, can realistically run and sustain itself in a way that allows it to be financially sustainable. So financial feasibility is looking at the money we've got to raise. How much is it going to cost to build this store? Can we raise the money to build that store? And once it's open, can that business operate in a way that will keep it open and sustainable and often pay for the debt we took on to build that store? Financial feasibility is both pieces. Again, why? Because we want it to stay open. The grocery industry is not an easy industry whatsoever. It has very narrow margins. I can't afford to take on a lot of debt, and we have to plan within those realities. So we're testing financial feasibility every step of the way so we can create that co-op that is going to last and actually make our purpose come to life. So in a little more depth, there are two pieces of financial feasibility, the funding feasibility and the operational feasibility. I just wanted for those of us who are visual, I wanted to visualize this out a little more. I know I am. Funding feasibility is that we know the cost to build and open the business and that we're able to find the sources and funding the co-op can access and can afford to take on. Maybe we can access $5 million worth of debt, but we have to also be able to afford it, which will show up in the operational feasibility. Maybe we have, and do we have realistic ideas of what that cost is going to be to open that store? We need realistic costs and realistic sources for where we're going to find the money to fund that. That's a big piece of financial feasibility. And the other half is that operational piece. You'll be testing if the projected income minus projected expenses to run the business will leave enough to pay the debt and retain reserves to continue operating the business. All right, so we've been through community feasibility, broad overview, market feasibility, broad overview, financial. Last one is site, and then we're going to get into some more in-depth examples. Site feasibility is that the location you have chosen for your business meets all market criteria, financial criteria, and operational needs of the business while meaningfully delivering the vision of the co-op. So in your market study, there are going to be criteria. And they're saying, well, if you build the store to this size and have these departments and have sometimes this many parking spaces, this level of visibility, if you have all these things that's going to say you're going to need to meet those sales goals that you put into your financial planning, and then you built from that a financial plan that shows, yep, this can work, the site must meet all of those criteria that were laid out in the market feasibility and the financial feasibility, or the co-op still may not be feasible, may not be successful. So that is the last piece of the four. Again, market, financial, and site feasibility being the core pieces of your business plan. All right, I'm going to take a pause here. We're going to dive into feasibility through the stages and how it manifests. But any quick core questions about those four areas of the feasibility you'll be testing as a startup food co-op, or might be in the midst of testing as a startup food co-op? All right, we will keep moving. Hopefully this will paint more of a picture for y'all. So feasibility through the stages. First off, people ask me, well, when does feasibility happen? And there used to be a way of using this word, and it wasn't incorrect, but feasibility testing, a business plan, coming up with a feasible business plan that has been fully tested is a stage 2 task. It still is. But in the past, this term was used to just define that stage. We pulled it out of there because feasibility is an every stage task as a startup food cooperator. Whether you're just starting to think about starting a food co-op or you were just a few months from that co-op getting open, there are pieces of feasibility testing and assessing that you are constantly doing. This doesn't go away. It's part of every single stage. So I'm bringing us back to this vision piece because remember how I said purpose and core values are mostly tested by that community feasibility piece, and we're going to more depth what that might look like. Those things tend to stay rock solid once they've been defined. Who we're serving to cause what improvement to our community or what growth in our community through what specific values, ways we want to deliver that. The business plan tends to be the piece that can move around. as we're looking for feasibility. So if this is Bricktown Community Market again, building the economic wealth and physical health of Southeast Bricktown through cooperation, that's not the negotiable piece. That's why they're organizing a co-op at all. It must accomplish this purpose. And they've gotten pretty clear through owner input and processes throughout their development that the core values, the way that that purpose must be delivered to feel and look like their co-op, to be worth it to them, for it to be Bricktown Community Market, are defined. There are many ways we can meet the purpose and core values, though. Again, this is that mutability of the business plan I brought up. So let's say the original goal, when they started planning for Bricktown Community Market, they thought, well, what we really need is a 10,000 square foot store, like a full service grocery store. It has to have a community room. We want it to be mostly conventional foods, the stuff people are used to seeing on the shelves at other chains, with a little bit of local and natural food. We needed to have a full service deli. There are so many folks who don't have time to create their own food, may not even have the resources or space to do that. We want them to be able to pick up healthful food made in a full service deli to order, to have that dignified, enjoyable food experience. And we feel very strongly it's going to be at the corner of Fuller Street and Weber Avenue. It needs to be there. There's a building there that used to be a grocery store, and that was a hub of the community. We really want to be at or very close to this intersection. This was the original vision of Bricktown Community Market. There's nothing wrong with being that specific about what they wanted, except what we can promise our owners when we first get started moving together as a community, or members, if you call them members, is the purpose and the core values that is developed from what they react to, what they need, what they want for their community. What they charge the board to do is find a feasible way to deliver that purpose through those core values. And that business, they said, we're going to run a sustainable community-owned business. That's a value. Okay. And it's going to meet this purpose, but it could take a lot of forms and still meet both this purpose and core values. We want to know what we want. We want to have a starting point, but it may or may not bear out right away that every piece of this business plan details right here, just these 3 bullet points even, are possible in a sustainable financial market are market feasible, are financially feasible. They may or may not be possible. If we couldn't deliver this exact business plan, would there be no point in developing Bricktown Community Market? If it's really coming from the heart of cooperation, I would hope the answer is no. We can still meet our purpose, and we can still meet those core values very potentially. But maybe as we're testing the market and financial feasibility, especially, we find some details of this loose business plan, this hope we had of a business plan, isn't going to be feasible. So maybe that turns into, it could also be, could a 3,000 square foot store that is mostly natural, local, and organic. They might have realized, wow, there's really low profit margins on conventional food. No matter how we crunched it and moved the numbers back and forth, we couldn't come up with a sustainable business that could do mostly conventional food, but there are higher margins in local and natural food. And as we talked to the community about local and natural foods, we found out there's a lot more desire for that than we even knew. And we together as a community kind of got our heads around that and pushed and pulled a little and realized maybe this is something we do want, and that's really going to make the business more feasible. Maybe we can live with having grab and go prepared foods. That still meets that need for people to have quick, healthful meals. But it means we don't have to have a full service deli, which is financially unsustainable in a lot of food co-ops and in a lot of size communities. But we're still meeting that value, right? We're still getting people that healthy, sustainable food. Maybe there's minimal in-store seating with a big community events board. What we realized is we want everyone to know when and where things are happening. We're going to have a big community events board. We're going to have a little bit of a seating area where we could do small events, but they'd kind of almost be in the middle of the store when there was time and place for that. And we also could use maybe we have a little outdoor space, and we can take our programming, all the stuff about this wonderful food, into the community and still meet that goal of creating a more physical health for our co-op. And maybe we found out about a project that is actually 4 or 5 blocks away in the same neighborhood, that this new YMCA business development complex. It's going to be a YMCA, and it's going to have all this parking, and there's enough space right in this visible corner for a small grocery store with grab and go foods. And we've realized that too could meet our purpose and core values. Also could, and again, this would be community by community. I'm not saying it would, but there's so many different ways the business plan could be structured that maybe will get you to feasibility when another vision might not. So purpose, core values, rock solid. Business plan can move around as we're looking for feasibility. Maybe it ends up being a 6,000 square foot store. And this is a very common mix actually these days, 60% natural, local, organic, 40% conventional foods. We have our grab and go meals but we can fit in a salad bar. And maybe there's minimal in-store seating again, but we actually can be adjacent to a community kitchen space and have a farmer's market in our parking lot because this YMCA development is going to have a community kitchen space in the same building, and they were open to us maybe trying to get a farmer's market going on the weekends in their parking lot. This is another potential business vision, business plan that will meet the purpose and core values. So what I'm trying to point out is that business plan is the piece that can be flexible and that say, okay to make changes. Exactly. Thank you, Bev. It's okay to make changes to the business plan to find feasibility because feasibility is the holy grail. If we can create a feasible cooperative business that that delivers this purpose through these values, I mean, that's what we're existing to do, right? The magic could be part of our community that is this cooperative grocery store for decades to come. Feasibility is the sexiest word in the world, really, when it comes to developing our cooperative business to deliver these things. And so it's okay to make changes and shifts if we're not compromising our purpose and core values. And it may be necessary as we're testing feasibility. Sometimes it's not. There are a few food co-ops, I would say Assabet Food Co-op in Maynard, Massachusetts, which is successfully opened 2 years ago and doing quite well. Their business plan, their business reality now is very similar to the business plan they created maybe 2 years in. In the beginning, actually, they had a slightly different business plan. It evolved a little bit more toward natural and organic food in their case than they originally were thinking, but otherwise pretty much stayed close to what they were expecting. We also have cooperatives that have gone from thinking they were going to be completely conventional and natural and conventional who have shifted on that, like Detroit People's Food Co-op. And now they have a mix. They're one of those stores that have a nice, I don't know their exact percentage, I'm not going to be quoted here, but it's somewhere in that 60-40 range and realize their community wants both. And it made them more financially sustainable to do it that way and allowed them to provide a bigger and better experience. These things evolve. As we're testing feasibility, we may find certain pieces we were dreaming of are not completely doable, but maybe with some tweaking are. So they can, as a basically illustrating, you can start testing the feasibility of a business plan you have in mind, but you've got to be open to the possibility that it might morph or change. Now, we don't have a lot of time to get into this today, but that also means we don't want to be making giant promises about exactly how this business is going to show up. It is so much more important to activate our community around the purpose and the core values, and that we will be bringing a grocery store that does those things, but that our job is to find a feasible way, a feasible business, a feasible grocery store that will bring those things and make them a reality for our community, and that will be a process. We will not know overnight. All right. So I'm going to jump into just a little bit through thinking about this through the stages, and we're just going to get in depth on stage one, a little bit on stage two. So if community feasibility is the heart of the game in stage one, we're looking for community feedback. Is there real interest in the idea of the co-op? Remember, I'm looking for that. Community feasibility means we've got activation around a purpose and that core values are emerging very quickly about how we want to meet that purpose as a community. People are excited. They want to engage with these ideas. They're getting involved. There's community buy-in. We need this in stage one. We're testing for community feasibility. We're looking for our folks stepping up. Are there people who are willing to put in the effort, show up to meetings, maybe help us organize tables? Are you finding people with the capacity and ability to take on all the work? Because there isn't someone else to do the work. When it's a co-op, it's your community. You may be able to get the funding to hire a staff member who will assist you, but really the core and heart and a large majority of the work is going to come directly from the community. When the co-op talks about starting to sell shares in the co-op in the community, are people interested in that? If we're not seeing much buy-in to that idea, we may not have community feasibility quite yet. And then just in general, do people want it? Are people showing up and giving the input? So are they excited about the co-op? And what I mean specifically here again is the people that you've said you want to serve. The co-op's purpose is to serve who are those people showing up. Community feasibility is going to basically feel like momentum. People are excited about the purpose, they're getting involved, they're helping to do the work. It is hard to move past this point, and I've seen it occasionally, but it is very hard to move past stage one without real solid community feasibility and go back and rebuild it. Not impossible, but hard. So a lot of focus is being put here. But also, um, why does this matter? Why does this matter more than any other type of feasibility at this stage? It's because your co-op, one reason, there's a lot of them. Your co-op will never be the cheapest source of food, period. There is always a way to get cheaper food than the food co-op because of lots of things our industry is up against. That's a whole nother session. But it is an absolute truth. And occasionally we're the cheapest on something, but overall, we're not going to be the cheapest shop if you were able to go anywhere in the community. The purpose and core values will be as much why people shop at the store as the food itself. So this purpose and core values must truly feed the community. Every successful food co-op out there is a great grocery store, providing the food that people want, but it is also very tangibly providing something else. It is providing a purpose that people want to see manifest in their community. We all could get our food faster or cheaper, most of us, somewhere else. That's why it matters. The community must see itself and be activated by that purpose and values. And who your co-op resonates with now, this is that piece of community feasibility I was talking about where I said, no, is it actually resonating with the people you say the co-op's going to serve? Is that who's showing up? Because who your co-op resonates with now in stage one is very likely who your co-op will always resonate with. There are exceptions, but not very rarely. If your organizing ownership base doesn't look like the people or neighborhood the co-op says it exists to serve, it's likely to stay that way. So part of that feasibility has to be, have we developed a vision and core purpose and values and communicated them and interact with the community in a way that they own them, that it belongs to the community the co-op's going to exist to serve? I know I saw something real quick. Check. Is the feasibility work done by consultants? Yeah, that's a lot about the tools of how you do it. There are different ways to do different pieces of it. And we're going to I'm going to touch on that, but I admit I'm not going to fully address that in this session. This is meant to be a broader overview, but I'm going to talk about it before we get to the end, and I hope it will be helpful. There are multiple providers you'll be looking at to help, and you'll be doing some of it yourself. Also in stage one, market feasibility would look like, we highly suggest a preliminary market study. This is a broader, less specific market study. We actually have a whole session coming up later this week with Patrick Shabram of G2G Research, who's going to talk about the difference between a preliminary market study and what to expect from it, and a full market study. A preliminary market study is market feasibility for stage one, and it's critical. It will tell you what sales are possible in the area that you want to serve, what will be the sales impact of the product mix you're thinking you want to do, and what kind of size of store should you maybe be thinking about to attain those sales. It's going to give you a loose picture that you can then kind of assess market feasibility wise, and there are details, again, we can look at it with you, they can look at it with you and say, this is going to be really tough. This sales per square foot is really low. That's going to be hard to combat, or maybe this product mix might need to shift to combat that and talk about the pieces. Or it may say, this looks pretty good. This is normal or on the high side of average for a startup food co-op. You can feel pretty confident that there's no reason to pause here if we have community feasibility because the market feasibility is looking pretty good. It's to know what we're up against. That's what we're trying to test market-wise in stage one. Financial feasibility will tell you, and so it will also, like I said, that preliminary market study will tell you the sales per square foot. And we can compare it and give you some idea what kind of challenge you're up against. The financial feasibility would, in stage one, look like filling out our sources and uses tool, which was co-created with Don Moffitt Yay, Don Moffitt from Colluminate. And you can plug in those sales from that market study and your size of the store is going to be, and get a good sketch of what it might cost to build and develop the store that you are thinking, the size store off of the offerings you want that you think you're going to have, and start to draw a picture of where all that money might come from and how that looks, how you feel about the idea of raising that kind of money. Do we want to go forward with this kind of business plan if it says, yeah, it looks pretty good on the market side, but we might need to raise 5 million. How do we feel about that? And thinking through what those sources might be, starting to get a feel for what we're up against if we're going to go forward financially. It'll give you a ballpark of how much money the co-op will need to raise, and it'll help you consider, do we want to do this? This is, and site feasibility, you should be learning in stage one, what are the site characteristics you need to run a grocery store in that kind of range of what you were thinking of the market feasibility. The market feasibility will tell you you need this kind of parking. It may not tell you you're going to need a loading dock. You're going to need this kind of electrical panels. You're going to need this kind of sewer system. You need to learn about some of that stuff so you can start assessing what might be a feasible site. So you want to learn about the characteristics of a feasible site in stage one. And you want to get to know the landscape. You want to start be putting out there with the city, with property owners, with commercial real estate agents about the co-op's intentions, around what size you're thinking, what type of store, and those characteristics that you're going to be looking for and needing. That priming of the pump is key. Startup food co-ops will tell you, established food co-ops will tell you, quite often the site that you end up finding was not the one that you first identified, but because you had that, had out there those feelers and you knew what you were looking for, something popped up that was absolutely perfect later. Now, some of you will ask me, what if we already have a site? This is becoming not uncommon that some communities will already have a site that's being gifted to them or their organization already owns if they're a nonprofit that is trying to launch a food co-op. And to that, real quick, I'll just say it's still time to learn site characteristics. You need to find out what the site characteristics are that you'll need for that grocery store and start thinking about if your building has them. You want to, so you need to look at your site's challenges. You need to start assessing what structural issues does it have, assess it against the need for those needed site characteristics and start thinking it through. And last but not least, I'd still be getting to know your landscape. Not every time is the site that we absolutely thought was the one we were going to go with. It's the one that works. It's the one the city's offering us for free, so we have to go with it. I'd say, and I'm wild estimating here, but about 50% of the time does that actually end up being the site. Sometimes it comes up later. Something happens, it falls through, the site's not feasible, and the co-op still opens. So you still want to be keeping your mind open. So that would be like what it would look like in stage one to be thinking through feasibility. In stage two, real quick, the grow part of stage two is grow and plan. You're going to be, you need a full and high functioning board. That is community feasibility. People are stepping forward to lead and have the capacity to do so. And membership and ownership growth is not only continuing and increasing that grow, we need to be growing. We need to be growing our board functionality. We need to be growing our leadership. We need to be growing our owner base, and people are getting involved. We're looking for that growth. That's what community feasibility will look like in stage two. That means people are continuing to buy in. Sometimes we have community feasibility in stage one, but we were talking to people a lot like us, and we like, woo, everybody's really into it. And then we hit the edge of the bubble. And now we aren't knowing how to talk to the rest of the community, and the idea of the co-op, the purpose of the co-op is not really resonating with them. So we might not find that we continue to see this growth that is the sign of feasibility, of community feasibility in stage two. Lots of ways to deal with that, address that, but that's what we'll be looking for. And then under plan, this is why stage two was used to be called feasibility, is because this is when we're going to do the heavy work of coming up with a feasible business plan to meet that purpose and core values. It is not going to have every single I dotted and T crossed and say, therefore, if you build the business exactly like this, it will be a success, but it'll be a feasible plan. So we've outlined with business characteristics, and those business characteristics, the market feasibility, the financial feasibility, and the site feasibility, meaning we are able to find a site that meets the characteristics needed. Those things line up pretty darn well. And that we choose at that point as a board to vote to move forward, that the project, we found a business idea that meets those values and purpose that looks feasible. It looks like we could build a real sustainable business from it. So this is the plan we're going to go with, and we're going to move forward into stage three, where we would be looking to gather the resources to build that business plan. So the feasibility keeps evolving through every stage. It goes through, it'll be different, a little different stage three, four, and five as well. Just wanted to kind of give a picture of how it continues to evolve and how, yes, absolutely stage two, finding the feasible business plan is the main body of work. So this is where you'll hear feasible, feasible, feasible. Because once we found a feasible business plan where all those pieces of feasibility interconnect, we're going to vote to go for it. And if we don't interconnect, we're going to pull back and go, how could we change our business assumptions, the location, the size, the product offering, something, still meet our values and purpose, but build something that is actually feasible. And we'll work that process until we have a feasible business plan. And then we'll move into the next stage. Last little bit real quick is just why do we put community feasibility first? How long does it take to complete this process? Absolutely, it does happen, Emma. A lot of things are taking place. There are a lot of things going on at once. There are 5 stages to being a startup, but 4 of them before you open. And that process before the pandemic, on average, was taking 5 to 7 years. Since the pandemic, that number has gone up. We've got startups opening at 10 and 12 years, but the pandemic was definitely a big factor. So we'll see where that lands as we keep moving. It seems to be coming down for co-ops that are focused, that are started organizing post-pandemic. But some of that is just that the costs have gone up exponentially since the pandemic, and they're probably about to go up exponentially again due to tariffs. So it's a big question, but the feasibility process, getting to a feasible business plan, depends on how much community capacity you have and how fast you move, how much funding you're able to find to move through those pieces. That could take as little as a year and a half. I've seen it take as much as 5 to 7 years. It depends. I want to real quickly just talk about why we're stressing this community feasibility. Are we saying in a food co-op to put the purpose and core values first and then build a business plan that has the feasibility you need to meet the purpose and core values rather than let's just make a feasible business plan for the kind of grocery store we want and then sell folks on the purpose and core values and get that ownership co-op piece going later. And just real quick, I wanted to address because it's what we've seen work again and again and again. If we were just trying to build a great grocery store someplace that needed a grocery store and that's all we were trying to do, then fine. But that's not how food co-ops thrive. Food co-ops thrive on being built by the community, for the community, from us. And so we have to have investment in the purpose, the core values. They have to feel like they belong to us, not something someone landed on us that they might ask us like a little bit of input on. And so as an example, I will give Detroit People's Food Co-op, but I can give you almost any startup food co-op that has opened successfully in the last 5 years and before that, that the purpose and the core values were aligned first and with lots of community input and interaction and learning together as a community. Sometimes to the board, sometimes the board and volunteers, sometimes the whole membership base. But there was lots of community learning and building and to create a solid purpose and core values that really met what they needed and wanted. And then to charge the board to work with consultants with professional support to build a business plan in a store that would meet that. And Detroit People's Food Co-op, while like every startup, so we like our sales be even higher, is meeting the sales that were expected and is doing really well. And we see this over and over again. Why do we suggest you do it this way? Because some of us believe it's the magic that make co-ops actually successful. But even if you don't think it's that, this is the direction, the development direction that has worked. Creating buy-in after you've planned a business and gone, by the way, we want to do this for the community and it aligns with things you guys want, so you should be on board. We've not seen that work. That's not something we've seen work. So that would be the core reason for that. Now, I was going to bring up, I want to do this full overview and give us some perspective on where all this fits. I wanted to ask, and I'm truly asking, please put your answer in the chat. We do have space to do a bonus session next week called the Tools of Feasibility, talking about what tools are used to do each piece of feasibility and how you access them, where you find them, who you'll be utilizing. If people are interested in a session on the tools of feasibility, please put a yes in the chat or a high five or something, and we will add a bonus session on that. But without this foundation and what feasibility is and why it's important and how it works in food co-ops, I feel like we're jumping. We go like, well, here are the tools, go do the thing, but we don't know why we're doing the thing and how it impacts our development. But I'm happy to do that additional session next week, and it looks like there's a lot of interest. So we will be adding that Tuesday, April 1st at noon and well, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern, and I will email you if you registered for this and let you know when that registration page is up so you can join that. Are there questions, comments? We've got a little time here to get into any and all additional thoughts. Let's say, oh, Taya, NCG is using 1,000 per square foot. Why that amount per square foot? Okay, so I'm going to do that one really lightly. It's because established food co-ops who've been open for a while, 1,000 per square foot is usually the minimum we see just success, the ability to fund the co-op and then pay the co-op's debts and be financially sustainable, pay the overhead that it costs to run the business to be there. We have seen with startup food co-ops, that isn't the number that I necessarily use with startups. It's funny because we didn't used to talk about sales per square foot as a big thing in market studies, and now we're finally all saying, and I don't mean this at NCG, just as a movement, it is the thing in the market study. If the sales per square foot are under what we're seeing as average around startup food co-ops that open are successful, we're probably just not going to generate the sales to afford the overhead. Even if you did it with no debt, you could actually run your financial feasibility saying, we're going to get grants to pay for all of the development and building of our store. And sometimes that won't be enough. If the sales per square foot's too low, you still can't afford the overhead, the staffing, the rent, the space, the equipment upkeep. You just can't afford what's necessary to run the business. So that's up a question, a number that's up for discussion. I haven't talked to NCG about their number, but I will tell you, a lot of people are like, well, what about Detroit? Well, what about all these different startups, even Gem City? We were seeing a certain level of sales per square foot. If we had seen successful startup food co-ops with a, much lower sales per square foot, we would be thrilled, hallelujah, and we'd be telling you about it, and we would be sharing that information. We have not seen it, and we've seen people attempt it. We've tried. People have tried to apply themselves to it. Again, this $1,000 number is higher than what I would use. And I'm happy to talk to people one-on-one, but I absolutely understand why NCG is using it. So that's just to give you some perspective. Again, it can feel like people are trying to shoot down what you want to accomplish, but the reality is that Gem City, Detroit peoples start food co-ops, whether they're in wealthier communities or historically redline communities, they're attaining certain sales per square foot. It's key to financial feasibility. I'm seeing things 700 and over generally work. There's some room for discussion depending on if you can do it with no debt for it be a little lower. But reach out to me individually. More information on community feasibility would be helpful. Yes. Identifying purpose and core values in a meaningful way. We have a video series kind of on that and that is out of date, but it's not bad. That if you go to our website and put in vision and the search bar, it will give you a page that will show you a series of videos that we did on this about how to get that feedback, at least the first time around, that continues to be a gold standard for how to do it, honestly, and runs pretty well. It just certainly could be updated a little. So that's in there. And the community feasibility piece, we have a new tool for assessing how your community feasibility is going. And that will be in the tool session. I will be linking that for you that talks about some of those, helps you kind of at least test how you're doing in those areas. And then when it comes to correcting for some of those challenges, that is, of course, additional conversations. The session will be, yes, those who asked, it'll be Tuesday, April 1st, the tools of feasibility at 1 p.m. Eastern, 1 and noon Central. I'm going to add that. It doesn't exist yet. I'm going to add that. I was going to see if there was really demand. And then I'm going to email you once that page is up. It will probably be late tonight, but I will email you so you can register if you want to for that. Any other questions or comments real quick? Okay. I'm going to thank you guys so much for being here. I am going to wrap us up. Please, we've just dropped a survey via email in your email box. Please take the 2 minutes to fill it out. It lets us know your responses really allow us to keep these sessions getting better and better, and it allows us to keep them free of charge because we can show our sponsors and our grantors that this is an effective program for the community that they want us to serve. Coming up, we have two more sessions today, shared use kitchens and co-op projects. We've had so much demand for discussing this. PFC co-op in Kalamazoo is one of the only successful food co-ops to have a shared use kitchen as part of their co-op. They're coming to talk about that and how they made that a success. So you can consider, it doesn't belong in every food co-op project, I'll tell you that right now, but you can consider what it takes to do that and if that belongs in your co-op plan. And then we tonight have lessons from the first 2 years. Sam McCormick is the general manager of Aspect Co-op Market, who opened about 2 years ago now and is very successful. Sam was a food co-op GM before this. This is their first startup food co-op, and they are going to share all about the things they learned that they wish they had already known when they started being part of this co-op that we can all learn from. There's a whole bunch more sessions coming up, and you can find them all on our website. And just thank you again. We had a record number of sponsors for the FCI Live 2025 series this year, and they make it possible. They believe in you, they believe in what you're doing. So please show them your support. Thank you so much to them for making this a reality.
Goodbye.